is do not commit adultery. Not bad, right? Not bad at all. There's one key thing that's missing.
Sorry, you wonderful human being. Welcome back to the inner church, where I make the connection between what people say, do, or have and their inner voice. Forget the complicated stuff that people tell you or sometimes even lie about. And also forget all the nice pinned videos you will find on YouTube. This channel only deals with the basic stuff and raw human conversations and the translation to the inner voice. Today I dive into the first part of a teaching of Sean McDowell, who is a very interesting guy, whether you are an atheist or a Christian, because he is a truly gifted communicator with a real passion, as you can see in this video. Anyway, I reveal how this also is tied to the inner voice. So let's go.
ChatGPT, write me a brief one-paragraph introduction to a sermon on Exodus 20:14, do not commit adultery. And here's what ChatGPT wrote. Good morning, beloved congregation. Today we delve into the sacred words of Exodus 20:14, which carry a profound message that resonates through the ages. You shall not commit adultery. These divine commands handed down to us from Moses out at Mount Sinai speak directly to the sanctity of marriage and the purity of our relationships. They serve as a guiding light, reminding us of our commitment to fidelity, trust, and respect within the covenant of marriage. In a world tainted by moral compromise, this commandment invites us to reflect on the importance of honoring and cherishing the sacred bonds that unite us. Let us explore together the timeless wisdom and transformative power of these words. Not bad, right? Not bad at all. But as I read it and I thought about it, there's one key thing that's missing. You see, ChatGPT is artificial intelligence. It's not real human intelligence. And it's lacking one of the big differences between AI and humans, which is empathy.
Okay, let me first stop it right here, because there's already a lot that we need to unpack. But first, let's take a look at empathy from a psychological standpoint. Because when we look at Daniel Kahneman, a notable psychologist and author of the book Emotional Intelligence, he tells us that empathy goes beyond just understanding one another's emotions. It's a deep connection where we truly feel the emotions of another. So from a psychological standpoint, empathy isn't just a single process. It's a blend of cognitive empathy where we recognize and understand someone's emotions, and emotional empathy where we literally feel their emotions as if they were our own. And in the 20th century, in our hyper-connected yet sometimes emotional distant world, cultivating empathy has never been more crucial. It bridges the gap, bringing us closer and strengthening the fabric of human relationships. But again, it's not just about understanding, but genuinely feeling with others. So why is this important according to Sean? And basically, this is what he's going to explain in this video. Okay, can we now already use the inner voice perspective to explain how empathy works, and also share your point of view about the inner voice in the comments below? Because when we look at empathy, what happens? We see something with others, perhaps an emotion, and then the inner voice is triggered within ourselves. And probably, depending on which of the two inner voices you use, the voice of insecurity, because most of the time empathy deals with emotions like sadness, anger, or whatever. And then the voice of insecurity in our head probably shifts a little bit upward and does the talking in your head. Oh, why is she hurt? What happened? And then the internal narrative in your head starts. And you also, because of the voice of insecurity, become a little bit more emotional. And as I explained in many of our videos, we have two inner voices, only two. The voice of security and the voice of insecurity. And the voice of security is the one responsible for giving us confidence, trying new things, positive self-talk. And the voice of insecurity is the other voice. The voice most of the time responsible for lack of confidence, feeling insecure, do not trying new things, and all the negative talk in your head. Okay, empathy. So we can also have empathy when we experience joy, the joy of others. And what happens then? Someone is joyful and expresses how happy he is. And most of the time, that's the voice of security that does the talking. And when we see someone talking with the voice of security, our own voice of security becomes a little bit more dominant. But it all depends of which of the two inner voices in your head most of the time is the dominant one. For instance, if you have a very loud inner voice of insecurity 90% of the time, even if you see someone experiencing joy, this can even trigger your voice of insecurity to become more dominant. Why is he happy? Why can I not have all the success and all the luck that I see with other people? And that's what we call depression. So it all depends of which of your two inner voices is the dominant one. But unfortunately, with 95% of the people, the voice of insecurity is the dominant one. And it can mean that in every part of your life, that voice of insecurity is the dominant one. With most people, it's in certain parts of your life, not every part. Anyway, Sean talks about the difference between AI, artificial intelligence, and humans, and that's empathy. And he's right. Empathy, that's the internal narrative that we have in our head, is something that ChatGPT or an AI does not have. It simply responds to questions and things. It doesn't have an internal dialogue. Let me do this, let me try that, No, that's not the case. And humans have internal dialogues, the two inner voices. ChatGPT or an AI does not have an internal voice. And that is the big difference. And that also is perhaps what is consciousness. But I will talk about that in different videos. So let's get on to the next part.
If we judge others who have committed adultery or other forms of sexual immorality, but we have only refrained for fear of getting caught, marring our reputation, or lack of opportunity, are we really any morally better than those who go ahead and commit the act? I think Jesus would say no. That's where Jesus condemns all of us. He doesn't let anybody off the hook. In fact, I think Jesus would say the heart of the problem is the problem of the heart. The heart of the problem is the problem of the heart. So as we jump into this passage, it might be helpful in light of that we actually define our terms. Now, what do we actually mean by adultery? In a sense, adultery is sex between a married person and someone who's not their spouse. So if you're married, it would be having sex with anyone who's not your spouse. If you're not married, it would be having sex with somebody who's married. Now, technically, the commandment to not commit adultery doesn't rule out premarital sex. It doesn't rule out same-sex sexual activity. But in some ways, it's a stand-in for a larger sexual ethic that the Old Testament expands upon and Jesus ultimately expands upon. And we'll get into that. Now, as I was looking at this passage, it went through my mind. I'm like, why is this in God's top 10? I mean, it makes sense, don't murder. It makes sense, honor your father and mother. But if God could give 10 commandments to follow, why does the commandment to not commit adultery make the top 10? And sometimes this might be hard for us to understand in our culture because our culture kind of mocks biblical commands about sexuality, doesn't it? They're repressive, they hold us back, they limit my freedom.
Okay, here Sean highlights that if we judge others who have committed adultery or other forms of sexual immorality, but we have only refrained for fear of getting caught, marring our reputation, or lack of opportunity, are we really any morally better than those who go ahead and commit the act? Then he also goes on to say, the heart of the problem is the problem of the heart. Anyway, let's first look at what judging others for their actions from a psychological standpoint means, because have you ever wondered why we're quick to judge others based on their actions? Well, according to Daniel Kahneman, Nobel laureate and author of Thinking Fast and Slow, he believes that our mind operates using two systems. System 1, fast and intuitive, and System 2, slow and deliberate. Often, when we judge, it's System 1 at play, making quick judgments based on limited information. Psychologically, this is a protective mechanism, an evolutionary residue helping us assess threats swiftly. But in today's complex world, these snap judgments can lead to misinterpretations and biases. Being aware of this mechanism allows us to pause, engage our System 2, and see a broader, more comprehensive view of others and their actions. Okay, now let's again use the inner voice instead of all of this. And let me know in the comments how your inner voice impacts your life. Okay, what happens when we judge others? It's basically the internal narrative that we have when we see other people doing something, performing some act. And that's also part of the mirror brain I talked about in other videos. So when we look at things, every time our two inner voices have a narrative, a story about what we see. If you look at the tree, you say, oh, that's a tree. If you look at someone fall, you feel the pain because your voice of insecurity does the talking. Oh, that might hurt, and oh, that's painful. So the narrative in our heads, dominated or determined by one of the two inner voices, is the one that's doing the talking and also the one that's judging people. But most time, judgment has a negative sound. And most of the time, it's because of the voice of insecurity that's doing the talking, the louder voice. Because judging someone not for their positive things, but most of the time for their negative things, is pointing a finger at someone. Oh, that's stupid. Why did she do that? Or something. And that's the voice of insecurity. Because if your two inner voices are in balance with each other, there's no need for you to judge. You can people be and do whatever they want. And that's the goal of this channel. That you learn how to master your two inner voices. And when your two inner voices are aligned with each other, there's no need for you to judge. You accept that people have flaws, that people can do good things and bad things, and you know by looking at what they're saying and how they act, which of the two inner voices is the dominant voice in their head. And if you understand that, then there is no need for you to judge other people. It just slips away. Even if you see very bad things happen to other people, there's no judgment. You can understand. And also, there's no judging between if people believe in God or do not believe in God. There's no judgment from your side because you do not need it. And I will go into atheism and Christianity in other videos. Sean, of course, is a Christian apologist and he spreads the gospel or the belief, but in my opinion, it doesn't matter if you do or do not believe. If your two inner voices are in balance with each other, you have found the truth within yourself. Okay, let's get on to the next part. But first, a message of encouragement. The only way I can grow this channel is for you to simply hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. So can you please do that now? By doing so, together we both can explore a wide area of topics like faith, religion, Christianity, Judaism, spirituality, law of attraction, consciousness, atheism, human behavior and emotions, mindfulness, success, wealth, happiness, relationships, parenting, and even thought-provoking topics like identity politics, virtue signaling, cancer culture, diversity, gender, conspiracy theories, and politics. All through our unique inner church lens. Discover how the inner voice shapes conversations and gain the power to master your own inner voice, making your dreams come true. Thank you, and now back to the video.
Here's what adultery is. We know it harms them. Everybody watching this show gets immediately why this hurts him and why it's so hard for him to reconcile with his mom. We get it intuitively because we've seen the hurt of this. We've seen the pain from this. But when this commandment was written, I think in some ways when God says don't commit adultery, literally society rested upon people not committing adultery. Wars were fought, there were honor killings, tribes were wiped out that started with affairs. I mean, the theme was basically, if you sleep with my wife, I'll kill you. If you kill me, my family will kill your family. If your family kills my family, my tribe will wipe out your tribe. It was like this escalating conflict that started off with adultery. So God's commandment is meant to stop that for the flourishing of society. So in some ways, it makes God's top 10 for horizontal human reasons, but it also does for vertical reasons. Why is adultery such a big deal? Marriage is the primary relationship God uses to illustrate his love for the church. I mean, instead of siblings, instead of business partners, the primary relationship that God uses to illustrate his faithfulness to the church is marriage. And over again, we see things like James calling loving the world.
Okay, here Sean talks about why adultery is such a big deal. But first, let's dive into the role of marriage from a social perspective. Because according to Dr. Esther Perel's work, marriage has evolved from a tool for economic and social stability to a union demanding emotional fulfillment. Today's marriage is less about societal roles and more about personal growth. Psychologically, it's our primary source for connection, but with changing social norms, its purpose is continuously redefined. While traditionally about procreation and security, modern marriage emphasizes mutual growth, love, and self-discovery. It's not just a ceremony or event that leads to a new phase of life. No, it mirrors society's ever-evolving values. Okay, now let's look at why adultery is so a big deal from an inner voice perspective. What actually happens? Well, it can be easily explained again by the two inner voices. For instance, let's say you have a heightened voice of insecurity about your relationship. It means that your inner voice questions if your spouse does love you, and that makes you feel insecure. Or you see your spouse, woman or man, talks to someone else, and that makes you feel insecure. Then the voice of insecurity becomes the more dominant one. And then that voice can make you do things. For instance, you are open to new adorations from others. If someone else says, "Oh, wow, you look great, you're attractive," then your voice of insecurity lowers again a little bit and you feel more secure with that person. And then you might think that perhaps you can find things in the other person than your spouse. The other thing around also works if you have a heightened voice of security in your relation and you actually believe that you are so special and all the great women or men out there should also benefit from your shining light on the world. That means that you have a heightened voice of security and you think, I can get away with this. I can make it happen. I'm the big player if you're a man, or I'm the big woman if you're a woman, or whatever. But it's also because the two inner voices are not in balance with each other. Because when your both inner voices are in balance with each other, you do not question the love of others. You do not question your own intent because you have voices that are in balance with each other. So you're not insecure or not overly confident because you need both. You need a little bit of insecurity in a relationship. Why? Because that makes you want to put effort in it. Bring flowers or organize a nice dinner out or whatever. So it all ties back to the two inner voices. And that's why it's so important that you master your two inner voices. And I can go on for hours why it's so important to not commit adultery from your own perspective. So not for the other's perspective, for your own. Because you want your inner voices to be in balance with each other. And when you commit adultery, you know there's something wrong. Because you do not want others to commit adultery on you. And your purpose in life is to find loving relationships, to have loving relationships, to be healthy, to be a little bit wealthy. And the only way you can achieve all those things is if you learn to master your two inner voices. And that's why it's so important. And I will also talk about why the 10 Commandments exist and perhaps why there is a new and better way to look at things. And that's the two inner voices, because if you balance out your two inner voices, everything else will also work out because it's innate. It's a result of your two inner voices being in balance with each other. And all the destructive things that happen in the world is because of one of the two inner voices within people. That's the dominant one. Okay, this was a very short video and the first in a 2-part series. So thanks for watching and until next time. In the meantime, listen to your inner voices and take control of your life. And let me know in the comments what videos you want me to make. Stay strong.